Hello photographers. The Pentax K-S2 was released in February of 2015, and a little over a year later I finally got my hands on one to review. So first I want to talk a little bit about the KS camera line. See, in July of 2013, Pentax announced the fantastic Pentax K-50. And then a year later, in August of 2014, people were kind of confused when Pentax announced the KS1. But if you follow Pentax, you'll notice that there has not been a successor to the K50. And that's because this new KS line has replaced the KXO line as Pentax's entry-level DSLR. Now, as of recording this video, this KS2 retails on Amazon for $518 with the 18 to 50 millimeter weather-resistant compact lens. So, let's take a look at the specifications. The KS2 has a 20.2 megapixel APS-C sensor wrapped up in a nicely weather-sealed body. For maximum sharpness, the KS2 has no anti-aliasing filter, instead relying on Pentax's innovative anti-aliasing filter simulator. The KS2 is also the first Pentax DSLR with built-in Wi-Fi, though now the K3 II and the new full-frame K01 both have built-in Wi-Fi, making in-camera Wi-Fi available throughout the entire Pentax DSLR range. The KS2 weighs 678 grams, body and battery only, which is actually a bit heftier than the 650-gram Pentax K50. It has a 3-inch fully articulating 921,000 dot LCD screen. It has a 100% coverage pentaprism viewfinder with a 0.62x magnification, an updated 11-point SAFOX 10 phase detection autofocus system with 9 cross-type focus points, and a frame rate of 5.5 frames per second when you're shooting in burst mode. Now, this frame rate is actually a bit disappointing because it's a half frame slower than the 6 frames per second of the K50. Now, I know that's not a huge difference, but it's disappointing to see it get slower instead of getting faster. And the buffer on the KS2 is pretty anemic, which isn't surprising because this is an entry-level camera. So when you're shooting in RAW, the camera sustains the full 5.5 frames per second for just 5 photos, and if you switch to full resolution JPEGs, that will double to 10 photos before the buffer fills. So this performance is in line with the Canon Rebel series, but both Pentax and Canon are outperformed by the buffer capacity of the latest cameras in the Nikon D3000 and D5000 series. One nice thing about the KS2 is the buffer clearing time. With a SanDisk Extreme Class 10 UHS-3 60 megabytes per second SD card, the buffer clears in a pretty impressive 3.5 seconds, whether you're shooting RAW or JPEG. Now, like all other current Pentax DSLRs, the KS2 has in-body sensor-based image stabilization, so no matter what lens you use, you have the option for image stabilization. And like other Pentax DSLRs, the KS2 has a built-in intervalometer for time-lapse photography. And what's really neat is it also includes creative interval modes for stacking images to create star trails and other long exposure simulations. So all in all, like the Pentax K50 before it, the KS2 is a very nicely spec'd entry-level DSLR with features that no other DSLR in its class have. And this is a Pentax, so it almost goes without saying that this camera is built like a tank. The body is a metal chassis with a polycarbonate exterior, and it sports 100 points of weather sealing. And in terms of aesthetics, the KS line is a bit boxier than the K50 line that preceded it. When the KS1 was launched, there was actually quite a bit of criticism of the unconventional design. On the KS1, the mode dial was moved from the top of the camera to the back, surrounding the directional pad, and the front control dial was removed. In addition, a superfluous strip of LED lights was added to the front of the hand grip. And overall, the KS1 was a pretty camera, but it lacked the features that are characteristic of a Pentax DSLR. With the KS2, the design aesthetic of the KS1 has evolved, while the functionality of the K50 has returned. So first and foremost is the return of this front control dial, which I think is fantastic. This makes Pentax the only entry-level DSLR with 2 control control dials. So let's run this down. Starting with the front of the camera, you have the IR blaster, the front control dial, and your lens release button. Back on top of the KS1, you have the mode dial, and then of course you have the power switch and the shutter button, the exposure compensation button, the customizable P-line button, and the brand new Wi-Fi button. On the back is the live view button, the rear control dial, the customizable AF/AEL button, the image review button, the directional pad, and the info and menu buttons. The LCD screen is fully articulating, which is a nice new addition, and the directional pad has this new squared off design to it. Finally, on the left side of the camera, you have the flash pop-up button, the autofocus switch, and the customizable RAW FX button has returned. So really what we see here is that the KS2 takes the best of the K50 and combines it with the style of the KS1 to give us a nicely evolved DSLR. And it feels really good in the hands. You've got ready access to all of your necessary controls, and like a good camera should, the KS2 does its best to get out of the way and let you shoot. Now the one place it gets in its own way is with the focus point selection. Like on the K50, the OK button serves double duty to activate the focus point selection. And when you activate focus point selection, the directional pad buttons serve to move the focus point. Now, this makes perfect sense, but the problem is that after you've selected your focus point, the directional pads button remain in focus point selection mode. This disables all of your traditional functions. Now you get an indicator in your viewfinder, but I think this would work much better if the camera automatically switched out of focus point selection mode after 5 or 10 seconds. Now I know I'm being a bit picky here, and to be honest, I know this is a small quibble, but it is something that's always stood out to me on the Pentax cameras. So now let's talk about the image quality. At 20.2 megapixels with an ISO range of 100 to 51,200, the KS2 produces some wonderful images. In the studio under good lighting, the KS2 is a champ, and this is not at all surprising. Pretty much every camera performs fantastically in good lighting conditions. So the question is, how does it do in low light? In short, the KS2 holds its own. Of course, I did the bar band test, and I was very pleased with the results. Here at 12,800 ISO, things look really fantastic. You have good colors, and you have good detail. There is noise, but it's nice looking noise, and there's almost no color noise at all, and I see no evidence of banding. At 25,600, the noise is definitely more prominent, but it's not at all blotchy, and there's still no color banding, and there's still very little color noise. Now, I forgot to shoot at 51,200 at the bar, so I played around in the basement a bit, and even at 51,200, I was very impressed. It's clearly no ISO 100, but at 51,200, it manages to retain good color and good detail, and again, the color noise is really well managed, and it's only in extremely low light with very low contrast that you start to see banding and noise degradation. Now, one thing you may notice is that these photos have softness at the edges of them. All of the photos that I shot were with the Pentax 18 to 55mm SMC DA kit lens, which is not the standard KS2 kit lens. The KS2 kit lens is a new 18 to 50mm compact lens. Now, I can't speak to the quality of that lens, but I know that the KS2 will give you beautiful images when you put a really good lens on it. And this is evidenced by the portraits that I shot in the studio. With these portraits, you can see great sharpness and detail at the center of the 18 to 55mm kit lens that I was shooting with. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the KS2 has 11 focus points with 9 cross-type focus points, all of them driven by the updated Sapfox 10 autofocus system. And as an evolution of the Sapfox system, the KS2 does a great job focusing. Now, I don't have a K50 anymore, so I can't do a direct comparison of the two, but to me it feels as fast and as accurate as the K50 was when I reviewed it. And like the K50 and every other camera, it's not perfect, but no autofocus system is. In fact, when I was shooting the bar band, I did have some focus misses, but in low light with moving subjects, this is a common occurrence. Let's move on to the movie mode, which is a bit of a mixed bag. Like the K50 and the KS1, the KS2 can shoot full 1080p HD at 30, 25, and 24 frames per second. But at 720p, it can only shoot at 60 and 50 frames per second. Now, the quality of the video in all lighting conditions is very good, even with the jump to the 20.2 megapixel sensor. And a really nice addition to the KS2 is the external mic jack with the manual levels control that they added to this. But the video mode has a fatal flaw. So here's something decidedly odd that I just discovered about the Pentax K-S2 in doing some testing. The controls of the camera while in video mode are disabled when you have the LCD screen flipped out around in selfie mode so that you can see yourself as you're looking at the camera. Now, I checked this in manual mode, picture mode, to see if it was the same way, and it is not. In picture mode, when shooting in manual with the screen flipped out, you can see the controls on the screen, you know, your settings and whatnot, and when you move the dials and buttons and whatnot, the stuff changes. But in movie mode, I can't change the aperture, I can't change the shutter speed, I can't focus the camera, I cannot start recording if the screen is flipped all the way forward into selfie mode. I have to push the screen back to a 90-degree angle with the camera before any of the controls will reactivate. In fact, this low light video test is a perfect example of how disabling it is. With the LCD flipped back, I could not tell that the camera had not focused on me when I started recording this low light video test. To me, this is a fatal blow to the video mode, which otherwise is quite good, and I'm wondering if this is a firmware bug that nobody has noticed, or if this is a feature that Ricoh added to the camera for some reason. Regardless, the video mode on the KS2 is a case of one step forward and two steps back. Now, the last thing I want to cover here before wrapping up is the Wi-Fi feature on the KS2. This is a really nice addition to the Pentax DSLR lineup and is implemented quite nicely. First of all, the KS2 can connect to your mobile device via Wi-Fi or NFC. Now, my iPhone 5C does not have NFC, so I connected via Wi-Fi, which was a very easy process. After downloading the Pentax Image Sync app to your mobile device, all you do is turn on the Wi-Fi in the camera's menu settings. And then you go into the connection info menu to get the Wi-Fi credentials. Then connect to that network on your mobile device, and when you open the app, you can review and download images, and you have full remote control of the camera with full access to focus and exposure settings. After the initial setup, you can just press and hold the Wi-Fi button on the top of the camera to turn on the Wi-Fi network and then connect your mobile device. So this Wi-Fi is a really nice addition. All right, let's wrap this baby up. All in all, the KS2 is a solid Pentax DSLR. When you compare it to the KS1, it's a substantial improvement, but when you compare it to the K50, the improvements of the camera are more modest. If you've seen my K50 review, you know that I love that camera, and I see much of the K50 in the KS2, which makes me love this camera too. Where the KS2 improves over the K50 is in the addition of Wi-Fi and the jump in megapixels. The image quality is great on the KS2, and despite the jump in megapixels, the ISO performance remains great. The slight dip in the burst mode frame rate is a little disappointing, but the fast buffer clearing helps mitigate that. Like the K50, the KS2's video mode is lacking. It will be fine for casual video, but not much more, especially with that LCD disabling controls when it's in the selfie position. And like the K50, at the time of its release, the KS2 represents a great value when you compare it to similar cameras in its class. When you compare it to the similarly priced D3300 and the higher priced Rebel T6i, the KS2 stands out with its dual control dials, intervalometer, and higher maximum ISO, as well as more cross-type focus points, a larger viewfinder, greater coverage, and an actual pentaprism. And like the K50 before it, I think the Pentax K-S2 packs a huge amount of value and control into a very affordable package. To sum it up, if you want a solid DSLR with dual control dials and a host of advanced features, great image quality, and super easy to use Wi-Fi for an amazing price, the K-S2 is a no-brainer. And here's the great thing. If you want all of that, but you don't care about Wi-Fi or having more megapixels, the K50 with the kit lens is still on the market for $378, giving you two amazingly affordable Pentax DSLRs to choose from. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed this review of the Pentax K-S2. If you have any questions about this camera, cameras in general, or anything else, let me know down in the comments. And then do me a favor, would you like this video and subscribe to my channel? If you really like this video, share it with your friends. But the most important thing you need to do, no matter what camera you have, is get out there, take some damn photos. I'll see you guys on Thursday. It's so fucking hot in here. Oh.